Aaron Jones has signed with the Minnesota Vikings, but that is not good news for his dynasty value. We will explain why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $200 if your bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. Follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. Also, check her out at Pro Football Focus and Behind the Steel Curtain. On today's show, we're going to be discussing a ton of running back movement, including Zach Moss going to the Bengals. We'll discuss who's the biggest winner in that backfield. We'll discuss Justin Fields, who has not been traded as of yet. But I want to start with Aaron Jones, who was released on Monday by the Packers after not taking a pay cut of around 50%. The following day, goes to the Minnesota Vikings so he can go off against his former team twice a year. What are your thoughts on Aaron Jones's dynasty value now that he's in Minnesota?
Well, first we have to just start out by acknowledging, and I want to shout out awesome fantasy content creator, JJ Zacharyson, who had probably the goatiest tweet of all time. And okay, I'm going to read it. Imagine telling someone 2 years ago that Aaron Jones would end up with the Vikings, David Montgomery with the Lions, DeAndre Swift with the Bears. He's calling for Dalvin Cook to find his way to the Packers so we could have a full AFC North or NFC North running back swap. And I think it's a great idea. I'm obsessed. But I have to say, I'm a little weirded out by this signing. I didn't expect it. I know there was a little bit of hype after the release of Alexander Mattison for Ty Chandler, and we like Ty Chandler, right? Like, I think he's a really solid running back. I think especially in comparison to Alexander Mattison, you saw a pretty stark contrast in just their performance on the field. I mean, you stats aside, the eyeball test, there was a world of difference. I don't necessarily think that Aaron Jones has fully lost his step. I don't think he's washed. He's 29 years old, but I think for a 29-year-old running back, actually probably in good straits. He's got some solid receiving skills, but the fit's just an interesting one for me.
I don't love it. I don't love it for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't love the quarterback situation in Minnesota. And we know that a lot of Aaron Jones's value has been tied into what he can do as a receiver in the touchdowns. I just don't know if Sam Darnold is the quarterback in Minnesota to get this offense rolling.
But Marcus,
go ahead.
How likely do you really think it is that Sam Darnold is the guy? Because I think that's a fine move to make. Like but you need a body at the quarterback position. I probably would have opted for like a Jacoby Brissett, perhaps, who I know signed with the Patriots, but I would have been making an aggressive push if I needed a stopgap at the position for a Jacoby Brissett, a Jameis Winston, as opposed to a Sam. But I mean, again, not my team, not my problem. But like, do you really think Sam Darnold is going to be the starter come week one? Because I'm not buying it.
Yeah, I do. I think if it's not Sam Darnold, it's likely going to be JJ McCarthy, which I like even less for Aaron Jones's value this year. It's only a 1-year deal for Aaron Jones. And the money was, I think it was upwards of the max is $7 million. There's just not a lot of money. And I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota, if they're not very good this year, and especially down the stretch, if he's just kind of getting phased out of the offense, that they're using more younger players in the backfield. At least with Green Bay, we knew what his role was going to be. There was some consistency week in and week out. Now that's gone. He's going to have to adjust to a completely new offense. And we've seen a lot of times when these running backs at the age of 28, 29, 30 switch teams, they have a really, really hard getting back to that fantasy ceiling. So I understand the appeal of going to play in the same division as the team that just cut you. I guess I'm just a little bit more bearish that this is going to work out.
I think that's fair. And I mean, Aaron Jones, from a dynasty perspective, RB 29. So the cost I think is reasonable for maybe a year one, a 1 year loaner, I'll say. But I want to talk about another uh older aging running back real quick who just switched teams, who had been like Aaron Jones with the same team his entire career. Let's talk about Austin Eckler real quick, who
Yeah.
signed with the Washington Commanders, which again, another really interesting fit, I thought. But obviously you had Antonio Gibson depart the Commanders, who he's played sort of that third down running back role. Not totally surprising for Antonio Gibson, considering he's a converted receiver, but like he's going to the Patriots now. Austin Eckler signs with the Commanders on a very underwhelming contract. I have to say, I'm surprised um, that he was kind of the last guy left in this mix, but I want to get your thoughts on his prospects with the Commanders, because if he's catching balls from like a Drake May or a Jaden Daniels, like we know Austin Eckler's specialty is in the receiving game.
Yep.
Are you interested in Austin Eckler as a year one loaner? And I'm going to make you choose. You either have to pick Aaron Jones or Austin Eckler, because they're actually right now being drafted back
Jones.
to back.
It's Aaron Jones. It's not even
Okay.
close. I just think he has a little bit more to offer than what Austin Eckler does. A couple things about the Eckler signing. First of all, he did not get a lot of money. Was it 2 years, $11 million was the max?
I think that was the max. I believe the base pay was somewhere around 2 years, 8 million. So like
nothing. That is
nothing.
part-time backup money. We should also mention that the Commanders, before we jumped on the show, they signed Marcus Mariota to be their backup quarterback. To me, Kate, that signals that they're going to take Jaden Daniels at number 2. Typically, you want your backup quarterback to have the same style as your starter, so you don't have to completely change your offense. So if it's Jaden Daniels, which I fully expect it to be, Jaden Daniels just doesn't throw to the running back very often. And we know that a lot of these athletic mobile quarterbacks don't throw to the running back because they would rather just take off with their legs. I'm really worried about Austin Eckler here. And Kate, even when the signing was announced, I tweeted Brian Robinson to the moon, because we knew the Commanders were going to add somebody to this backfield. I just don't think that Austin Eckler at this stage of his career is enough of a threat for me not to be all in on Brian Robinson.
Sad times.
I know.
That's
It
not
is
to
sad
me.
because Austin Eckler was such a good player, but it's pretty clear that his value has just completely it's just completely gone after what happened last year. Let's talk about your guy, Zach Moss, and my guy, Chase Brown, teaming up with the Cincinnati Bengals and what their dynasty values look like. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets, because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a number 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's number 1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That is $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You can even pick who you think is going to win the entire tournament. Imagine that payoff. That would be a lot of fun. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We want to let you know that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. All right, Kate, let's take this whole segment to discuss the backfield in Cincinnati. Let's start with the news that came first, that the Bengals have signed Zach Moss, your guy, to a 2-year, $8 million deal. What are your thoughts on that landing spot for Moss?
I'm pretty excited about this landing spot, actually, Marcus. I think that when I'm looking at the potential here in the Cincinnati Bengals backfield, I want to think about how these two running backs fit together, because Chase Brown had a very promising rookie campaign.
Yeah.
Lots of explosiveness, showcase some of that speed. And I think what Zach Moss does really well is the in between the tackle stuff. So I think the two complement each other in a very real way that, like, their skill sets, I don't see a ton of overlap there, which I think is good for both of
It
these
is.
guys because they can carve out a specific role for each of them. Now, I do think, and I'm pretty sure you agree with me, that Chase Brown is still the biggest winner here, though.
Oh, yeah, of course. There was a really good article from Jay Morrison from The Athletic, who covers the Bengals. And basically, the thought process behind signing Zach Moss and releasing Joe Mixon, which I should have mentioned at the top, was that they wanted to find a running back that better paired with Chase Brown because they're looking to expand Chase Brown's role in this offense, which makes a ton of sense. Kate, you and I have been talking all offseason about how the
They need
Bengals,
speed.
they need speed, right? And adding or just giving Chase Brown more work can allow them to do that. One of the things that Joe Mixon really struggled with the last couple of years is short yardage running. His efficiency went way down, and pass protection. He was one of PFF's lowest graded pass blockers in 2023. That just happens to be where Zach Moss thrives. So if you can let Zach Moss do some of the passing down work when it comes to picking up blitz, and then let him handle the in between the tackle running, that just allows Chase Brown to be a more dynamic weapon.
Yeah, and for the fact that, like, we're looking at Chase Brown, 23 years old, 5'10", 209 pounds. So he's not like the biggest running back in the world, but has a frame that I think can hold up to a decent workload while also still, like, showcasing some of that speed.
Hey, we got some breaking news about this Bengals backfield. Can I give it to you?
Please do.
Joe Mixon not being released,
What?
but traded to the Texans.
What?
Yes.
No way. Wow, that is fun. We actually never get the opportunity to have breaking news on this podcast. For whatever reason, we just record at moments where news is not breaking, but that is absolutely fascinating. So, I mean, also brilliant move by the Bengals front office to put that out there, put those feelers out there before the release, because always nice to get a little something back instead of giving up.
Yeah.
But Marcus, that is a fascinating move because Joe Mixon's contract, that has to have me believing that the Texans are going to utilize him as an every down back if you're going
Yeah.
to take that on.
Well, it's also interesting because there was some rumblings that they were in the Saquon Barkley market. Obviously, they missed out to the Eagles. There was also some reports this morning from Josina Anderson that they were in the Derrick Henry market, and that didn't happen. Well, now we know
Yeah.
that's not going to
Yeah.
happen, right? So it sounds like Derrick Henry down to the Tech or the Ravens or maybe the Cowboys. I don't know, but yeah, that's interesting. Joe Mixon to the Texans. It's a curious fit, but I don't hate it.
I don't love it, but this is me looking at Joe Mixon. And I mean, he has been a horribly inefficient runner for the bulk of his career. I feel like what they need is a guy that, more of a power back. I was actually kind of thinking Zach Moss would be an interesting fit. A guy that, with increased workload kind of wears down opposing defenses, and that's not as much Joe Mixon's game. Yeah, curious fit for me. I thought they would go for more of an explosive option like Tony Pollard or some kind of element like that that either would complement Damian Pierce or just be a better all-around option. I'm not loving this fit at all. For as much as I love the Texans offense.
Doesn't it seem like Houston's going to draft a running back in the first 3 rounds? Like they felt like to me they wanted to get a veteran in there that in case the draft didn't work out the way they planned, that they at least had some reliable options. I think this is a team that is primed to draft a like a Bucky Irving, or maybe they draft, Jonathan Brooks, early round 3. I just wouldn't be surprised now that they have Joe Mixon, they have Dameon Pierce, so they're not looking to add some speed to this offense.
Joe Mixon right now on Dynasty League Football, RB27 in terms of Dynasty startup ADP. Are you more likely to trade for Joe Mixon after this trade or less likely to trade?
Probably less likely. I just don't see him being a long-term value or anything there, but I'm kind of out on some of these older running backs, but I do want to mention our guy Chase Brown. Do you know where he's being drafted among running backs right now, going back to the Bengals?
I have to imagine it's way too late.
Yeah, it's RB 41, I believe. Yeah.
Smash.
Sorry, RB 48. I apologize. RB 48.
Smash. Even better.
Yeah.
Smash. Go trade for Chase Brown right this instant.
Any interest in trying to go out and acquire Zach Moss this offseason?
I do have some, because I think although it kind of depends on the market, right? It depends on the thought process of your league mates. If they are high on Zach Moss, like I am, then I don't necessarily know that you want to do that. But I think he's probably going to be a really good handcuff to Chase Brown. And what I like about Zach Moss is we've already seen what he can do coming off the bench. I mean, Marcus, in 2023, coming off the bench for Jonathan Taylor, he was on a 17-game pace for almost 1,900 rushing yards, 300 plus receiving yards, 17 touchdowns, average almost 20 and a half fantasy points per game in that span. Like, we know that he can handle a substantial workload if he's asked to do it. How much is he going to be asked to do that alongside Chase Brown? I don't really know, but I love to have a running back on my roster that I know if he gets opportunities that he can handle them. And I do think that Zach Moss is one of those guys that fits the bill.
I know this is going to sound like blasphemy, but there were times last year for the Colts where I just thought he looked better than Jonathan Taylor. And maybe he was just healthier and that was the thing, but he fit that offense really, really well. I'm curious to see what he looks like in Cincinnati, because I don't think he fit Buffalo's offense particularly well, but I do think when he's playing in a shotgun offense and he's right next to the quarterback, I do think he can have a lot of value. And I think he can be I think he can add value to your offense. We'll see about his dynasty value, Kate, but I really like this from like a team building aspect for the Bengals. I thought he was a major upgrade over Joe Mixon, and you got him at a fraction of the price.
Yeah, good strategy here from the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think that this running back tandem is probably going to be a lot more productive in 2024 than most would think at face value.
All right, let's talk about Justin Fields, who I called the biggest loser of Monday at the 33rd team. Let's talk about where he could potentially land in his dynasty value next. This episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. What's the first thing that you would do if you had an extra hour in your day? Would you go for a run? Would you take a nap? Or would you read that book that you've been meaning to get to? A lot of us spend our lives wishing that we had more time. The question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing into your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so that you can do more of it. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's done entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for any reason at no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That is BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. On tomorrow's show, we've got the great Matt Williamson joining us to answer your mailbag questions. So make sure that you tune in for that. On Thursday, Kate, we're promising right now. On Thursday, we're going to get to your Jaden Daniels rookie profile. So make sure you tune in for that.
We
There's
just
going to
got
be
way too much free agency news, guys. Like we couldn't ignore it. We couldn't ignore it.
We had to talk about where Joe Mixon landed. It's a huge deal. All right, let's talk about Justin Fields, who, Kate, at one point last month was being drafted as a top 8 quarterback, and now I wonder if he's even going to be a starter in the NFL this year.
Yeah, this has not unfolded in any sort of way that I expected for the market. So I do want to talk about with Justin Fields, what potential landing spots are there that we could feasibly see him, just maintain some dynasty value. Like it's not even a question of how much dynasty value he has at this point. It's, does he have a job? Are there any spots where he can come in and reasonably be a spot starter? Now, there have been some moves, like we talked about Sam Darnold, for instance, going to the Minnesota Vikings. We have who else?
Gardner Minshew going to the
Gardner
Raiders.
Minshew to the Raiders. Jacoby Brissett to the Patriots. Like
Russell Wilson to the Steelers. Your Steelers.
And what question? Like, which of these spots do you think is most likely to still make a trade for a quarterback? Because I don't think any of these, Gardner Minshew, Sam Darnold, Jacoby Brissett, I don't think any of them are winning options necessarily. I think Jacoby Brissett by far the best of them. But like, are there any of these 3 teams that you look at right now and say, I still think they go out and try to make a move for Justin Fields? Because if not, I think we just have to look at the fact that there's probably a chance he doesn't have a starting opportunity this year.
So if you are a Justin Fields dynasty manager, here's what you're hoping for. You're hoping that he doesn't get traded before the draft, right? You want him to be with the Chicago Bears, and then you want to see what the market looks like for a quarterback after the draft. Because I think the teams that are willing to trade for Justin Fields now are teams that just want a high-end backup, whether that's like Philadelphia, who just lost Marcus Mariota. Maybe that's the Colts, who just lost Gardner Minshew. But none of those places are going to give him immediate fantasy value because they're stuck behind a franchise quarterback or the hope of a franchise quarterback. What you want is the Broncos missing out on a quarterback entirely in the first round, right? So now they have to pivot to Justin Fields or something of that, because I think if he gets traded now, it's only going to crush his dynasty value.
I also think a lot of the situations that he could be traded to right now, not necessarily great ones.
No.
I don't necessarily know that there's a lot left on the table. Now, give me one team right now that would be your favorite landing spot to maintain his dynasty value.
That's a really, really hard one. Probably Denver. Probably,
Okay.
but I don't feel great about it.
How do you feel about the fit with the Raiders? Because I think it could be an interesting one, especially given the type of offense that they're trying to run. A ball control style offense, which I think Justin Fields could fit the bill if he could hold on to the ball and limit turnovers. So maybe from a standpoint of that, but when you look at, generating first downs via the run game, obviously Justin Fields could be a huge asset there. Keep the clocks running and build around that specific talent that he has. Any thoughts? Because I cannot buy that Gardner Minshew is going to be a starting quarterback in 2024.
One of the reasons why Luke Getsy got the offensive coordinator job for the Raiders, is because he basically told them that it was Justin Fields' fault that the offense wasn't better, right? So I just don't see the Raiders going out and trading for Justin Fields after they signed Luke Getsy, who they believe is a better offensive coordinator than maybe what he showed last year.
Interesting.
I think the Raiders want to be super aggressive in the draft. And I think they want to try to go up and get a Drake May or a JJ McCarthy. I just don't think they're all that interested in going out and trading for a Justin Fields, because now they just signed Aiden O'Connell, who can give them a baseline of quarterback play, but they're hoping for a lot more.
Interesting. Lots
That's
of tough situations here in the free agency period. And day 2, like, there's still a lot left on the board. I think there's plenty of names that we still need to be keeping an eye on here. Um, just a very interesting and probably one of the most fascinating free agency periods that I can remember for the overall trajectory of fantasy football, with the
yeah.
shifts we saw in the running back market, the quarterbacks, tight ends, not really, but like even wide receivers, seeing Gabe Davis get that monstrous deal. There's still a couple of really solid names that I think
Well,
are worth
I was
watching.
gonna
Marquise Brown.
I was going to ask you about the receivers because we've had 3 signings at receivers. Gabe Davis to Jacksonville, Devin Duvernay to Jacksonville, and Jalen Reagor re-signing with the Patriots. That's it. Like, that's the entire movement that we've got over the first 2 days. It seems like teams are kind of out on this wide receiver class in free agency.
Yeah.
Nothing yet on Hollywood Brown. Nothing yet on Calvin Ridley. It's weird. It very much feels like all the NFL teams believe this draft is so deep at receiver. Why throw money at this class?
And I think that's also telling of their thoughts of the running back class, right? Like, we saw teams get more aggressive at the running back position here, and I think it's because there are no really clearly defined tiers at the running back spot at this point. So I think it's very telling of how they feel about, you know, the group of free agents versus those players available in the draft. And all I think that means is we're going to be in for a wild time here
Absolutely.
in the NFL draft.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every single day. Go check out the channel on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. Go follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.